Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razam Pereira. The Supreme Court last month directed special courts to award compensation to sexually abused children on the lines of the NALSA scheme for victims of sexual assaults and acid attacks, till the centre finalises the rules. A bench of Justice Madan B, Lokur, Justice S. Abdul, Nazeer and Justice Deepak, Gupta took into account the fact that the centre had not framed any rules under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act on the basis of which special courts could award compensation to minor victims, and directed that NALSA scheme be used as a guiding factor for the purpose. The National Legal Services Authority had framed the compensation scheme for women victims or survivors of sexual assault and other crimes 2018, which the top court has accepted. The guidelines have come into force across the country from today, and it would be gender neutral. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyse how to deal with the problem of child abuse and the need for a strong law. Joining me on the programme today are Aditi Tandon, Special Correspondent of the Tribune, Karnika Seth, Advocate of the Supreme Court, V. Rajalakshmi, Sociologist, Janki Devi Memorial College, and Bharti Ali, Co-founder, Haq Centre for Child Rights. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Bharti, I'd like to begin the programme with you. You know, child abuse is such a grievous problem, not just here in our country, but around the world. Yet we don't have a law to deal with the aspect of compensation. Why is that so?
Well, let me correct you. That's not true, really, because as far as victim compensation in cases of sexual abuse of children is concerned, there is a law called the POCSO Act.
Yes.
And provisions in the POCSO Act under Section 33(8) and Rule 7 of the POCSO rules, which clearly provide for victim compensation, immediate relief as well as final compensation. And it is the responsibility of the presiding officer of the special court that is hearing the POCSO cases to take suo motu cognizance and initiate victim compensation measures. They have to make an assessment based on certain criteria laid down in Rule 7. And the compensation amounts can range depending on the need of the victim. So what is particularly good about the POCSO Act is it doesn't give you an outer limit. The judges can have the discretion to decide on the amount depending on a child's need, and the assessments that are made on whether there is a medical emergency, whether there are some educational needs to be met. If the child needs trauma counseling, then those needs also have to be taken into account. And another good aspect is that POCSO being a gender neutral law, both girls and boys get covered.
Right. So why do we need this then?
So these guidelines are actually to be used till the time that there is some amendment in the POCSO Act, which is on the anvil. And that's also to ensure that the states don't get confused between the state victim compensation schemes and the provisions of the POCSO Act. There has been a lot of confusion as of now. The states often tend to rely on their victim compensation scheme even in cases under the POCSO Act, which is not really required. But because of lack of clarity, that's how things have been on ground. So when NALSA came out with this scheme is specifically only for women. It very specifically says that for minors, the POCSO Act and its provisions will apply. Because of confusion, the Supreme Court had to be told that till the states revise their state schemes, and there is some common understanding vis-a-vis child sexual abuse and compensation for child victims, let these guidelines be followed by the states as well. Right. So it's an interim measure, really. It's not a permanent measure.
Till these guidelines are actually framed.
Till the government revises the POCSO Act, makes an amendment to clarify once and forever that as far as POCSO Act is concerned, the POCSO courts have the discretion to decide on the amount. And if the government decides to rely on some scheme, because the fund has to come through a certain scheme.
Right.
So if the government has to rely on some scheme, then the scheme has to have uniformity, and that scheme would be as per these guidelines.
Fair enough. All right, let me go across now to Karnika Seth. Karnika Seth, what is the NALSA scheme and how will it be implemented for child victims of sexual assault and acid attacks?
Well, when it comes to children, the victims who are victims of child abuse, they could be of different degrees, of different nature of crimes. Now, whether it's rape or it is any kind of grievous hurt or it is an acid attack, the crimes vary and the compensation slabs are there in the NALSA scheme, which pertain to women, but then if they pertain to children, a similar, the guidelines will be sort of mirrored for the children. So that's how the guidelines will be helpful as an interim measure. Like Bharti was just pointing out, that these areas, basically the scheme is a guideline which is only sort of a interim or a temporary measure till the POCSO rules clarify the position of law and how the compensation will be dispersed depending on the various rules which will be formulated for the compensation and the kind of crimes and the amounts that will be specified. While I also agree that there is no upper limit given in the POCSO for what would be the amount of disbursements in that regard, this rules may clarify certain slabs for various reasons, but I feel still there should be a discretion left on the judge to award a higher amount in case the particular case or the facts of the case require so. Because if you look at the NALSA scheme, there are slabs of say 5 lakhs for gang rape or 4 lakhs for a rape. They may not be sufficient in terms of a particular case scenario where the child belongs to a poor family and needs medical assistance, needs education, guidance, or financial aid for those reasons, or the legal aid for that matter. So it may be that there could be a higher amount regarding the particular facts of the case. In regards to that discretion may also be vested as per the rules, but then it is for the rules to actually say so.
Right.
That's how I feel about it. But it's a wonderful initiative by the Supreme Court. I really applaud the social justice delivery system. In a way, it's enforcing the law of the land in such a innovative manner. And Honorable Justice Lokur's judgments, in fact, the way the social delivery or the social justice has been uplifted and given its due value in this country, I really am very happy about the fact that the judiciary is playing such an important role in the law enforcement today and ensuring that the best interests of the children and the society are met with.
Right. Aditi Tandon, how will this change things now, or what changes really from today?
See, Frank, we've seen the POCSO Act, has helped bring perpetrators of child abuse to some sort of justice. Bharti's sitting here, she's brought out reports after reports. I remember having read one of the reports that Hug brought out, where it was pointed out that one of the victims of child sexual abuse actually got compensation under the POCSO Act after she had died, if I'm correct, Bharti. So, the solution does not lie really in guidelines. The solution, insofar as I am concerned, I've seen a lot of case studies. I've seen a very important report that the National Law School Bangalore brought out, on the progress of POCSO Act, and they also spoke of what is the problem, why is justice being delayed under the POCSO Act. Compensation is one part of the scheme. But the part which is important, Frank, is the mindset of the judiciary, the mindset of the legal prosecution system, the criminal justice system itself. I mean, how trained are our public prosecutors that are handling the cases under these laws? Because after all, the compensation that the judge is going to award is going to be as good as the case that the public prosecutor is going to argue in the court before him. Also, there's this whole issue of the training of Indian judiciary. We have seen that the POCSO Act provided for provision of special children's courts. Now, I'm not too sure, maybe, child rights experts will tell us how many courts have been established, because I personally have reported a number of cases, Frank, where, these children are victims of incest. The perpetrators are fathers, sometimes the perpetrators are brothers. The mother is going from court to court trying to save her daughter from a father who's continuing to molest the child, but there's just no justice. Right. So I'm not, you can call me a cynic, but I'm not too sure how this victim compensation scheme, a new guideline of the Supreme Court, well, it's an enabler, but after all, it is about the mindset of the judge as well as the legal prosecutor, as well as the policeman who's investigating the case.
Sure. V. Rajalakshmi, at the end of the day, can you put a price on the trauma that someone has really gone through?
No, it is absolutely not possible. It is very, very difficult. But at least with this kind of a compensation, earlier what was happening was that in the society, people were not reporting the crime. The parents, or for that matter, the girl who was unmarried, normally the parents used to get scared of reporting, thinking that maybe she may not be able to get married, or what will the society think, and maybe they might fall, because most of the times, very unfortunately in our society, the victim is always the person who's been abused, is always blamed for one reason or the other. The blame usually comes on that. So at least now what will happen is that the reporting will start. Of course, over the years, there has been a change from what it was 10 years ago. But still, this again will at least help the parents to come forward, for compensation. At least they'll be able to fight. The cases will be reported more. As a result, maybe in the society, there will be a change. What is very important is that we should look for a change in the mindset. Laws, of course, are there. Compensation, economic compensation is essential, though what they are at the moment proposing is not sufficient. But still, it is one step forward, and which is very, very important.
Right. Bharti, let me come back to you now. Compensation, of course, is one aspect, but let's broaden the scope of the discussion. Let's look at the root of the problem and how do we deal with that really?
Well, you've asked a question which, actually has a very philosophical answer more than anything else. Because it's not as if we are falling short on laws. The laws are there.
True.
In fact, we've been making more stringent laws, thinking and hoping that it's going to change the situation on ground. But we see reports day in and day out of some horrific incidents around us.
I mean, you open a news app, the first thing that you see is that at the end of the day. I mean, and it's endless.
Absolutely, it's endless. So, one wonders what is going to be the next step when some more gruesome case comes to light. And I don't know what is going to be more gruesome than what we've already seen. So there's got to be a lot of work at the level of, I think, awareness generation. The issue of sexuality and sexual abuse has to become part of daily discourse. In schools, as part of curriculum, we have to start talking about gender rights, equality, sexuality. We've got to talk about body parts, and we've got to look at it as, not something that the person should be ashamed of, with whom such an incident happens. If we lose an eye, if we hurt an eye, we go for treatment, we seek treatment. And we have to create an atmosphere where if any part of the body, including our private part, is hurt, we actually seek out treatment.
It shouldn't be tabooed at the end of the day.
There should be no taboo. That means a cultural change. And one sort of wonders, where do you really begin?
I think it should start from home.
It has to start from home. And, working with victims of sexual abuse has actually taught me something, that you have to pay equal attention to the families of the victims. True. Because often it's the families, that are perpetrating the same mindset, and, constantly either they'll switch off the channels when they're watching television, when something of the sort comes and they feel that this will trigger an emotion, without having any discussion with the child on the subject. There's no communication, no discussion, but on their own, parents will assume certain things and do certain things, not with a bad intention, with the intention to protect their child, but sometimes do things which are detrimental to the child's overall growth and development. And the taboo, the stigma remains with the child through parents' action and inaction. It gets, seeded in. So we've got to work equally with parents. Now, as far as mental health is concerned, there is nothing in this country, I'm sorry to say, that really looks at and addresses the issue of mental health and well-being of victims and families. It's so expensive, if it was to happen to my child, sometimes I sort of shudder. Where will I go? I can't afford that kind of money, A good psychologist in Delhi would cost you something like 2,000 rupees a session to 45,000 rupees a session of an hour. Where do I bring that money? So can we talk about community mental health programs, where communities are, engaged in it. We do give advice, as a culture, we have a tendency to just give advice on everything under the sun. It's about, so it's about channelizing communities towards healthy discourse, healthy discussion, and advice which is more of counseling, which helps people move on in life it's not just about preaching, it's not just about moral education, but it's about helping people move on in life with looking at possible opportunities.
I know many people who actually want to do something. There are people out there who want to go out and help, but at the end of the day, a conducive atmosphere is lacking, and hence, they back out.
True, and that's where I said that it's, I was just taking a session with a couple of young kids before I came for this program, and so we were discussing about how landlords will tell their tenants to vacate just because their daughter was raped, and they say, I don't like police coming to my house every day in, day out. What do you do with that mindset?
Right.
I hate to say that schools actually shun children who get sexually abused. They don't want those children in their schools anymore. If a child is in trauma and unable to cope up with school studies, there is nobody to assist this child. Rather, the child gets stigmatized. So that's where we need to bring a change.
Points taken.
Endless guidelines.
I can see Karnika Seth putting up her hand there. Let me go across to her. Go ahead, Karnika.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
I'm kind of agreeable with whatever views Bharti is sharing on this topic. Apart from the physical abuse, I also want to point out that the online abuse of children is on the rise, whether it is cyberbullying or any kind of stalking or depression symptoms are there. The people are trying to attack gullible children and involve them into financial crimes or other kind of psychological harm is being brought to them. Now that's a huge area of concern. We've already seen how hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've already seen, how the blue whale, attacks have been and how the children are being attacked online. Now that's something which is a huge concern. Even under the POCSO Act, we do have provisions to deal with sexual harassment through online means. But how many parents are really aware of, the benefits of giving them the right education, online education, how to safeguard themselves online, what kind of games the children are playing today? Are the parents able to monitor? How many parents are actually able to filter out the content or read the history of the browsing history of a kid in every single day? So this is something we have to use the technology. If the children are using technology today, the parents should equally use technology to see what and supervise the kids how they are using technology, and they're not they're being adequately protected from any kind of harm. That's something which I also wanted to bring to light, because I have done extensive research on the area, and I've realized that this is also an area where we need attention apart from the aftercare services, the psychological aid which the children needs, the families need, while the legal aspects definitely we are having the new provisions in the POCSO are coming every day. We are amending the law. However, the imparting of the trainings to the prosecutors and the judges is an area which I think the government has already started looking into. I myself have trained lots of batches of the police officials for POCSO, and the judiciary, the members of the judiciary also getting the trainings. But then this needs to really be in a very, very focused manner and a repeated manner, not something which is going to be one-time exercise.
Yeah, the family, the child, and everyone around, a victim goes through a lot when, when something like this happens, Veerajya Lakshmi. What needs to be done, after a person goes through such a traumatic experience, and do we have the wherewithal in this country to deal with that kind of a problem?
You see, the most important thing is that the parents should be able to guide their children first to recognize and to deal with it.
But
now, as a
maybe in many cases the
teacher,
parents themselves are unable to do that.
But they are unable to. But they also restrict. See, for example, I teach in a girls' college, and number of times our students do come and complain, saying that, ma'am, today in the metro or maybe at the marketplace somewhere, we were like stalked, or people were passing comments and all things like that. And when I say that, why don't you, why don't you complain? There are PCR vans all over. They say that, no, ma'am, our mothers or our parents, they say, don't get into this. Maybe because, the PCR van police personnel was telling us that we have to visit the police station number of times, or if it's a court case, then you have to go to the court. Somehow there is a very, very wrong, or rather you can say misconception, a lot of myths associated by saying that, good girls don't go to the police station. Good girls do not deal with the police. Good girls do not go to the courts. are not seen there often. So these kind of things many a times restrict these girls actually to raise their voice. Many times parents, don't want that. One, a lot of students who come from outside, when they're staying here alone, they also feel this pressure from the parents saying that, even if they are ready to go for it, even if they have a support system, one, there is no support system. Two, if there is a support system, which is most of the times we do keep telling them, look, you are now 18 plus, you need to deal with it. There are a number of ways in which you can go ahead and complain. But unfortunately, what happens is the police station is not seen as a public space. It is a space which is not defined well. And there are misconceptions. Parents do not want the children to face these kind of hassles. So this, what happens is perpetuator gets an opportunity to repeat the crime. Maybe if this was a minor one, then next time he gets a chance to do it, take it to a next level, and then it goes on. So the moment one realizes, the moment one comes across it, it is very, very important.
Once an offender, always an offender.
So therefore, it's very, very essential for us to actually deal with it.
Right. Another aspect, Aditi Tandon, and it's a major concern, at least I believe so, the abysmally low conviction rates as far as these crimes are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, under the POCSO Act 2014 onwards, we've been mapping the rates of acquittal and conviction. The conviction rates are very poor, and around 14% in 2014, and as late as 2017, I think the rate was just about 18%. So which only shows again, going back to the table, that how equipped is our system to bring the perpetrators of child abuse to justice. So, one aspect that the experts have pointed out is very important, that the mindset issues have to be looked at. But I also have to flag another important thing, Frank. There's this whole atmosphere of political patronage to a large number of children's homes. We are sitting here today close on the heels of mass child rapes in shelter homes across India.
Right.
I would like to flag your attention to Muzaffarpur in Bihar, where this journalist cum NGO owner Brijesh Thakur is under arrest for perpetrating mass child rape in his NGO in Muzaffarpur. And then I would like to draw your attention to a very big case that had caught national headlines in 2012 from Haryana. It was called the Apna Ghar case. And let us not forget that the case happened in 2012. 3 children, 3 girls who were constantly raped in Apna Ghar, which was in Rohtak, had to escape from Rohtak, come to Delhi. They had to contact the Delhi child line. When they called up the child line number, somebody from Meerut responded. I mean, that was the level of struggle these children had to face only to report their crime. And then 2012, the FIR gets lodged. Then the local police botch up the case. The case goes to the CBI. And finally, the judgment comes in 2016. Now you look at the POCSO Act. What does it say? 180 days, if I'm correct. Should be for the entire case to be wound up and justice to be delivered, 1 year. So 1 year versus 6 years. So I mean, where are we?
Right.
We also have to look at our political establishments, Frank. Are these people being given political patronage? Because in Apna Ghar case in Haryana, the woman who was actually running and perpetrating the crime, running the NGO, had been awarded the Nari Shakti Samman of the Haryana government for good work for children. Can you imagine?
Sure.
And again in Bihar, there are issues around how this NGO was allowed to, was granted renewals year after year. So it's a huge issue, and the political class has to join hands, the society has to join hands, family has to join hands. And a grey area in the Indian law, which I really need to flag because it's an area which I research, is incest. Incest is not a crime, it's not an offence per se in our country. In a lot of countries in Europe, in the UK, in a number of European countries, it's still a crime, a well-defined crime, but not in India.
Right.
You can, book somebody accused of incest under rape laws and under other IPC sections, but not a dedicated incest section.
Right.
So I think it's time we need to debate
Look at that
also.
as well. Yeah, points taken. Quick closing comments now from all my guests, starting with you, Bharti Ali, on the best way forward. Really, what can we do? What more can we do?
Well, the best way forward is, of course, as I said, we need to spread awareness on these issues. We need to start talking about a lot of these issues. We still shy away from talking about sexuality, and that's the saddest part. I remember 2009, 8-9, there was a parliamentary committee looking at the whole issue of introducing sex education in schools, and they rejected it completely. And till date, we really haven't gotten back to that. So that's one area. The other area is to start working on community mental health programs, because they are not just going to address the aftercare issues of victims and families, but they're also going to be a huge preventive measure, considering the levels of aggression and violence that have set in the society today. We need to deal with those on a very urgent basis, as urgent as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan.
Right. Karnika Seth, closing comments from you. Really, laws are not the problem is what the panelists have established. Do we need better implementation and stricter punishment, do you think?
As part of the making things easier for the police also to understand how to implement POCSO, we had written a manual also for the NCPCR, and these kind of initiatives which will clarify the law, which will community programs to bring in more health care, awareness in schools. All these are important essentials, and trainings, having more public prosecutors on the job, having fast track courts, and sensitizing the public on these issues, that they cannot maintain silence. If some child is going through an abuse, it has to be reported. It should be like a mandatory reporting, which is also there in the POCSO Act. And it is punishable offence if one doesn't report it.
Right.
So this is something which we need to bring in awareness about.
All right. Rajalakshmi, death penalty for child rape, accused has been talked about, has been debated at the highest level. Do you believe that is going to be a deterrent?
Yes, that should be there. Apart from that, all I can say is that the change of the mindset is very, very important. To all the stakeholders, which includes family, community, police, law, everybody should be more sensitive. As she rightly said, awareness, continuous, abhiyan should be there, launched, programs should be launched, awareness camps should be there, and the knowledge at the school level, college level, at every level should be there. I'm not saying that's not happening, but more needs to be done.
You didn't seem to agree with the death penalty.
No, the world and research across the world tells us that the stricter you get with the law, the higher are incidents of crimes. So there's definitely no, very little connection. There's also research which says that, higher sentences really don't have a deterrent effect. If it doesn't lower the crime, it doesn't, there's no effect at all. So we've got to start looking at those a little seriously. Death penalty per se is something we need to look at, but we can't get into that debate right now.
Right. Maybe we'll leave that for another time. It will take a debate on itself. Aditi Tandon, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
So I just want to say that 0 to 6 years we have this Anganwadi system in our country. 6 years onwards we have the schools. I think you really need to create a network of psychological counselors across your Anganwadi systems and across your schools, so that children, who are afraid to speak about their abuse with families. Let's not forget, the Women and Child Development Ministry showed us as way back as in 2007 that 57% of child sexual abuse is happening inside the family. So how do you enable these children to speak up? I think you have to have counselors in schools and in Anganwadi centers. That will be a good solution.
All right, with that, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. What's coming out of the debate, of course, is the fact that we need a holistic approach, really, as far as this problem is concerned, and everyone needs to speak in one voice to deal with this particular issue. It is a problem that needs to be dealt with immediately and urgently, and we hope that we can see the end of it in the days to come. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.